Hello. Okay. Welcome back. Stories that have to be told. Not long after the Wilders were settled the rock house, they made the last payment on the land they had farmed for the 35 years. Now the place is ours. They declared Rose said the Rocky Ridge farm with freaking modern houses, pastures, clear fields, and wood lots revealed any country estate she'd seen in Europe. But she told her parents the farm deserves a rest, and so do you. One of Manley's last farming ventures were a flock of sheep. When they were sold, he kept busy gardening, woodworking, weeding, and pursuing a new interest, a herd weight of faced goats. Sometimes he showed to the pool in the room in town to chat and play pool. He attended auctions and farm sales and watched Bruce Brock drive the tractor and use newfangled machinery on the land. Wherever he went, Manley was popular. He was witty and jolly, full of stories and keen advice about horses, farming, and politics. He and Laura were royal Democrats until the 1930s. While Manley kept himself busy, Laura decided to write her autobiography. She fought over her girlhood in the woods and the prairies with Pa and Ma and her sisters in the 50 short years. The frontier had vanished. Laura believed that her experiences were altogether too good to be lost. She said, "We're stories that have been told." In the 1930s, Laura opened a Blue Line school tablet and started drafting her story in pencil. She began with her family moving to an Indian territory and wrote the story of her life. Until her wedding, Manley should tell her manuscript Pioneer Girl. When she completed it, she walked over to the farmhouse and handed it to Rose. Rose was busy with her homework, but she did as Laura wanted her to. She typed in pencil pages of Pioneer Girl and gave her a session on the writing. George By was a New York agent who handled Rose's writings to Pioneer Girl, who was sent to him in hopes that he could sell it to a publisher. Everyone agreed that Laura's book was fascinating American story, but no editor would buy it. On a visit to New York, Rose herself tried to place the Pioneer Girl magazines as a serial. Again, no one accepted it. Bertha Harder, an old San Francisco friend of Rose's, heard of Laura's manuscript. Bertha and her husband, Elmer, were writing an illustrated children's book, and they thought Laura's work could become a children's picture book again. It was passed from an editor to an editor. And finally, the children's book department at the Harper and Brothers publishers became interested. Laura rewrote her material into a book about her memories of living in the big woods of Wisconsin. She included many of Pa's stories because she wanted someone to share it with the children. Her new attempt was the title Little House on the Prairie in the Big Woods. In 1941, Harper and the Brothers agreed to publish the book. In June of 1941, while her first book was on making, Laura Manley made a trip to South Dakota. They drove to Buick over the same route they had traveled to Missouri by the wagon 37 years earlier. The Middle West was another trial cycle, so the trip was hot and dusty. Narrow the Wilders, Errol the dog were on the running board on the cart. Often it was necessary to stop, give him water, or an ice cream cone. When Laura and Manley arrived in D. Smith, they found a modern little town. They drove miles away and stopped in Manchester, where Grace and Nate lived. Ma had died in 1924 and married in 1928, so Grace was the only English left in the area. The Wilders drove over to Prairie visiting Spirit Lake Pa's homestead. They smoked under old farm country looks as it used to. Where no, they found no buildings under tree claim, just a few of trees left. A grand field grew over the hill on the homestead where Rose had been born. It all makes me miss those who are gone. Pa and Ma and Mary and the Boost and Cap Garland Ormond. Laura and Grace spent a morning going through Ma and Mary's belongings, which were stored in the room of Ingalls' house. The house was rented out, and they found that everything of the value has disappeared. After visiting with his old friends, Anthony Smith, the Wilders drove west across South Dakota to the Black Hills, where Carrie lived. Carrie had married a Black Hills mine owner named David Swansea, and they lived at Kingstone, a little town at the foot of Mount Rushmore. Carrie welcomed Laura and Manly, and they all went on the tour of Black Hills in the Wilders' car. They chatted and reminisced as they drove through the pine forest and rock formation. Laura called South Dakota the land of used to be. When she and Manly completed long to return Manisville, they were happy to be back in the rock house under the cool trees. They had made a trip through the memories, such as Laura was traveling for memories in her writing. Little House in the Big Woods was published in April 1932, when Laura brought the first copy to show Rose. They both were very pleased. They liked the pen and ink illustration by Helen Swell, and the way Pa's stories and Laura's Wisconsin memories came to life in print. Despite the fact of depression had shown, the sales of the book Little House in the Big Woods was a success. Children and their parents immediately loved Laura's storytelling, so the many teachers and librarians. Little House in the Big Woods became a favorite in the bookstores, libraries, and schools, where it was often one new site of the pioneers. Laura's first royalty check for over $500 made her very happy at 65. Laura Ingalls Wilder was suddenly famous. I did not expect much from the book, where I said put hope that a few children might enjoy stories. I thought that immediately children started writing, begging for more books. It reminded Laura of the times that when Rose was little, saying, "Oh, tell me another story. Mama Beth, please tell me another story." Harper and the brothers asked Laura for a second book, and she decided to write Manly's story. His boyhood in Waterlawn, New York was full of adventure and excitement, but getting Manly to talk about it was difficult. He said it was not much out of the hand to tell a story, and was so modest that he did not like to be the focus of attention. But Laura persists and collected information about Manly's night year on the family's farm. The book was called Farmer Boy and appeared in 1933. Both the rock cottage and the farmhouse became place of busy writing activity. Rose's fiction now appeared in the Saturday Evening Post. Her oh my goodness, sorry. Her pioneer story, Let the Hurricane War, was published. There was and then become a famous book in the 1933. Laura and Rose often consult each other about their work. When Rose started writing pioneer stories, Laura shared tales that were then used in the daughter's work. Laura relied on Rose's suggestions and advice in her own work. Without you fine touch, it would be a flop. Laura once told Rose encouraged her, saying, What you write is always good. Laura still wrote in pencil and on line school tablets that she bought in the grocery store for a nickel a piece. She wrote when she could between fixing meals and washing dishes and other housework. Sometimes she woke from her sleep with a sentence on the idea or an idea in mind. Quietly, she moved to her desk and wrote for hours. Millie would find her asleep in the morning on the lounge or outlet frame. When Laura completed her manuscripts, Rose typed and then sent them to New York first. They went to the agent, George By, and they were delivered to Luz Ramon, her editor in the children's book department at the Harper's and Broward. When Tomato came out, the more of her books were Little House on the Prairie, which was published in 1935. It was the story of the Ingalls family moved to Indian Territory. Laura did a week's of research until she found the name of Zolde Chene, the Osage Sheriff or Chief, who appears in the Little House on the Prairie. She wanted her books to be known as true stories, accurate in historical detail. She explained that in writing books that will be used in school, such things must be right, and the manuscript is submitted to experts before publication. Laura's memory was keen, and she found that she could improve by going back as far as I could, and leaving it there. It would be go farther back, and was so farther bringing out of the dimness of past things that were beyond my ordinary remembrance. With her first 3 books selling well, Laura decided to do something that has never done before. She planned to continue writing the story of her childhood. Create a series of books she said it would be a historical novel for children, covering every aspect of frontier. Laura explained that all you want me to go on with the story to know what happened next. So Laura continued to write, and Harper Brothers continued to publish. One of the banks in Plum Creek was finished in 1937. Laura was 70, and though her hair was snow white, she was energetic and active, and her blue eyes still snapped with kindly good humor. In 1937, Laura and Manly moved one last time. They went back home for years. They had been homesick for their old farmhouse, even though the Rock House was a modern and beautiful place. Laura left the farm to do the historical research of the University of Missouri in Columbia, and then she moved to New York and finally to Danbury, Connecticut, when the Rocky Ridge farmhouse was vacated. The Wilders returned. Laura was glad to use her wood cook stove again and to live among the surroundings Manly had built with his own hands once more. She set up her desk in the little writing den off the room and planned more books. By then, her series had a name. The stories were called the Little House Books. Harper and the Broadway so many requests for information about Laura Ingalls Wilder that her editor, Lucy Raman, was anxious to meet her and to have her meet her readers. In October 1937, it was arranged for Laura to appear at the book fair held at the department store in Detroit, Michigan. Nellie had purchased a new character car, but she was 80 and decided not to drive so far himself. Instead, he asked his young friend Silas Seal to drive them to Detroit. Silas operated a gas station in Mansfield and had once in Detroit. He was good-natured and patient and willing to drive the Wilders. At the book fair's experience caused great excitement. Teachers, parents, librarians, and children all crowded into her speak. She answered questions and autograph books or how very popular her series was. Rose was busy in New York working on the Saturday Evening Post Central called Freeland, but she was anxious to know her parents had enjoyed the Detroit trip. The children all seemed widely interested and wanted to know how they were, and when Aura met Monzo and about their getting married, Aura reported in the letter, "You should have seen their faces when I spoke of Detroit, and lots of letters want me to hurry up and write about it. We're planning to finish our series with 3 more books about telling the Ingalls family last move in Dakota Territory early in the 1938. She worked on what became By the Shores of Silver Lake. She toiled for months on the book and sent chunks of manuscript to Rose for her comment. But in the springtime, Laura left Rocky Ridge on a trip that was both vacation and a journey back to land. She was writing of Manly and Laura invited Silas Seal and his wife Netta to accompany them on a trip to Pacific Coast and became pretty South Dakota. The Wilders and Seals had become close friends. Silas and Netta were so young that Manly and Laura regarded them as their children. Silas did all the driving on the 1938 trip. Laura and Netta sat on the back seat, talking happily and singing songs like "Oh, Waltz Me Around, Oh Willie," and "That's Where My Money Goes." From Innisfil, the travelers took Route 66 across Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona into California. They drove north along the Pacific Coast to San Francisco, and they proceeded into Oregon and Washington, and east to Idaho. They marveled at snow-capped mountains, meadow-off redwoods, the ocean, rivers, and cascades. Often, Celia stopped the car so that Laura and Netta could look for the wildflowers or the picnic could be prepared. In the Yellowstone Park in Wyoming, the Wilders and the Seals watched the gazer Old Faithful spout. It was so early to the season that some of the roads were blocked by snowdrifts. From the road, they saw bear and a buffalo and an elk. After viewing the natural wildlife beauty of the park, the travelers continued their journey. On the way back to Mansfield, the Wilders showed their friend South Dakota. They drove to Black Hills in Kingstown and visited Carrie. She had recently been widowed and was going, so our visit was appreciated. Carrie was enthusiastic about her sisters, and inquiry added her own impression of the family history. When Laura asked from the Kingstown, the travelers drove across South Dakota to Manchester, where they visit Grace and Nate. Laura and Manly showed the Seals their old prairie homes in the town of De Smet. Everywhere they went, Wilders were treated with great interest because they were parents of Rose Wilder Lane. Rose Dakota homesteading novel Freeland was known as best-selling book during the spring of 1938. It was very popular all over America, but especially in De Smet. When Laura met old De Smet friends, she explained her writing projects and asked for help and recalling facts and details of the town's first years. De Smet was a change, sometimes a familiar place, but Laura, she noted many of the original buildings were gone. Friends had died or had moved away, but still everywhere we were recognized faces. Laura said, but we were always surprised to find them old and gray like ourselves, instead of being young as in our memories. So many memories of her youth. And De Smet credited Laura's writing plans that she decided on 4 more books to complete her series. rather than free when she returned to Rocky Ridge after the Western trip. Laura finished by the shores of Silver Lake, and then she planned the rest of the Little House books. Again, I'm going to take a break before we start on chapter 17.